Hey everyone, and welcome back to Honestly Rebecca for a very special and very important honest conversation today with my good friend Nathan Wilbur. It is an honor to have him on the podcast, and I just want to encourage you guys. This is a little bit longer episode than you're going to be used to us having here on the channel, but this conversation is absolutely so important, especially for us as Christians. We're talking about what is going on over in Israel in a historical and biblical context, and we know as Christians we are responsible for blessing Israel. We know who blesses Israel, God blesses in return. These are God's people, and it is so important for us to stand by them, and in order to do so effectively we really need to understand what is going on with the current crisis over there. So be sure to tune in, listen to it over several sittings if you have to. This is so important. I really encourage you to listen to it from start to finish. So without further ado, dive right into this conversation with Nathan Wilbur. All right, everybody, we have got Nathan Wilbur here on the podcast today. I'm so excited to be talking about everything that's going on in Israel. Just to give us some context, I know a lot of us are very pro-Israel, but maybe we don't understand fully everything that's going on. So Nathan and his wife Malky have been friends of ours for several years now, and they are a Messianic Jewish family. They are part of Wilbur Ministries, which was started by Paul Wilbur back several decades ago. Nathan is his son, and now the family's just doing, you guys have got so many amazing projects going on. I can't even list them all, but so Nathan is kind of our personal resource for all things Israel. So I thought, you know what, I'll just bring him on here and let him be you guys' personal resource too, because as we all know, the news is not necessarily reliable these days. So Nathan, welcome to the Honestly Rebecca podcast for an honest conversation.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we hadn't actually gotten to see you guys in a while. I think last time was at one of the kids' birthday parties. So, it's good to get to chat with you.
That's what it's called, adulting.
Yes, exactly. So just to dive right into this, I especially have talked to Malky more, and we've got our mom's group text and all this stuff, and it's just been interesting for me to see. Obviously, we've been upset by everything that's going on, but I know it hits home so much more so for you guys. So when everything started, I know it's been over a year now, on October 7th, like what was that like for you guys? What's your initial reaction? Did you guys have any sort of, obviously there's always conflict going on, but I didn't really feel like there was much forewarning about this. So what was that like for you guys?
Yeah, there's a lot to this. And going back, I mean, you brought out a lot of good comments early on. You probably touched on 3 different pieces of this. But what we're dealing with today is it's complex because the truth has been buried on purpose. And we can come back to that later. But to answer your question, October 7th, it brings up a lot of emotion in the Jewish community that even today hasn't fully been expressed.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? We had to go immediately from a horrendous genocide, because that's what it was, to war.
Yeah.
So there wasn't time to really bury the dead, although there were memorial services going all throughout during sending a lot of my dear friends, their kids, going off to Gaza. And I remember we had a dear friend with us, Joshua Aaron, who leads praise and worship. And we were together on October 6th. And we had a wonderful time. But during it, I just couldn't shake this feeling. The Lord was like, I want you to pray for Israel. And in my mind, I'm like, well, Joshua Aaron's here from Israel. It's a Friday. It's a Shabbat evening.
Yeah.
Of course, seems logical. But it got so intense, I started to have tears come down my face, and I began to like feel in mourning,
Mm.
and that's not normal for me. So I said, okay, well, I'll wait till the moment where we can kind of have this prayer time. I went up, we prayed, and I'll never forget it because I had to look back at the timestamps in my mind of when these things occurred, and you couldn't have planned it, but they were all very specific times, even that God was calling us to prayer. So we go to bed, wake up the next morning, and typically I try to stay away from my phone on Shabbat, focus on my family. The day of rest, I love it. But I looked over and I had a lot of notifications, which isn't normal.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to get Joshua Aaron to the airport, and so I came up to check on him, and I didn't hear any movement. I'm like, he's got a few minutes. Maybe he's just being really quiet while he's, getting packed, which wasn't the case. So I go back, I look at my phone, and it says thousands of rockets launched into Israel. And sadly, because it's a normal occurrence, it shouldn't be for any country, if you
Right.
think about that.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if Mexico started launching rockets into the US, I don't think we would put up with one.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Israel's had to put up with tens of thousands of rockets coming out from Gaza and from the north. But
Yeah.
I digress on that for now. But so, and then I kept reading, and it said possible infiltration. I said, huh? That's not good. Is that possible? And on my mind, and I keep reading, and then it confirmed. Then reports were already coming in of neighborhoods being hit and people being murdered, and also military bases were hit, but those weren't the primary targets. It was to inflict as much pain and death
Yeah.
in a small amount of time. And so Joshua Aaron's daughter is over in Israel at this time, serving in the IDF, and I run back up to check on him again. Like, and I knock on the door, and I just said, "Hey, are you ready to go? The airport, got to go." And I said, "By the way, check your phone because there's a lot happening in Israel right now, and I'm concerned."
Yeah.
And I could hear him like, "What?" He's looking at his phone. He's like, "What in the world? What in the world?" And finally, like, he's trying to pack, and I'm helping him, and we're trying to put our thoughts together because it's all happening so fast, moment by moment. And I'm trying to keep him up because the notifications just keep pouring in, and the images that are coming in are just horrendous. And my heart is just racing, and I'm thinking about my friends over there, Joshua Aaron's daughter. And we get him in the truck, we're driving. He calls his daughter, and she said, I'll never forget it. She said, "Abba, I'm so sorry. I just talked with Ima, Abba's father in Hebrew, and Ima is mom. And I forgot you weren't together, that you're out ministering." But she said, "Don't worry, I'm okay. I'm in the far south, but my friends and their bases are not in a good position, and I can't reach some of my friends. So I'm really concerned about them." So I'll driving to the airport, and I just start weeping, and Joshua Aaron's weeping. We get there to the airport, I get his bags out, and as brothers do, we just hugged and just wept as we were seeing and hearing everything that was coming through in such a short amount of time. And it just brought so much fear. I'll never forget. It was like, I remember coming home, and I went live because I was like, I got to activate people that are watching us. We need to pray together.
I remember we watched that when you went live.
Yeah. And I was in the sukkah because it was at the end of Sukkot, tabernacles in English. And as I went live, I was getting hammered by these harassment what I know now to be fake accounts sending in like threats on me and my family.
Wow.
And I mean, when you fast forward, it all makes sense. Come to find out, Iran had created all these fake accounts to go out throughout social media so that
No
when people
way.
accounts, yeah, like ours would go live, we would be inundated with Heil Hitler comments, Jewish pigs. I mean,
What
ISIS
in
is
the
coming for you
world?
next. Oh,
Wow.
yeah. The
Wow.
amount of comments that came through on us was stifling.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was like, in that moment, I said, I either have a moment to continue in this broadcast, keep the faith, or I can get into fear and feel like it was what happened in Israel going to happen to Jewish neighborhoods and Jewish people here in the United States.
Right.
At that moment, there was just no way to know. So to answer your question, I know I'm kind of going around about it, but it's just to express so much happened so quickly. And even to this day, there's just this sentiment in the Jewish community that we're alone. Nobody cares about us, and we're having to deal with this on our own. And so in this political season, it's a huge concern and topic in our community, but it's been very difficult.
Yeah. Well, and I remember last year, right around this time, a little bit after, but us moms were talking, and there was some debate because not just you guys, but we have some other friends that are part of the Messianic community, and the moms were debating on, do we decorate for Hanukkah? Because I don't know if I want to be shining all these blue lights in front of our house. And it was exactly what you just said of you don't want to be afraid, but you also want to protect your family. And, where do you strike that balance? And just to be, I can say I was taken aback that we were even having that conversation. There's a lot of people that do care, but it's hard to show that we care or to know what to do. And there's a lot of false information out there. And like you said, that's very intentional. And some of it's intentional. And then some of it is then people are picking up the false information and running with it. So then it's just getting spread like wildfire. So you kind of touched on that briefly there for a minute of this intentional false information being put out there. So from the crazy thing is I had no idea about that. From the minute if you're on a live feed and you're getting these fake accounts to the macro of our major media outlets that it looks it's not overt, which we know that the enemy never is so overt. But I opened my news app today and it said humanitarian crisis in Gaza and da 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 da, and they're acting like it's Israel's fault when we know that Hamas has set itself up in at schools and hospitals and all of these things, and they're using their civilians as a human shield. But where does this come from? What's the false information? What would you say is the most dangerous of the false information that's being put out there? Like, can you just speak to that a little bit of what you've seen over the past year?
Yeah, one of the aspects of this is what I always try to encourage people with. If you are a believer in Jesus, the way we need to view this is through a biblical lens, not through the present culture.
Yeah.
It's been backwards. Pastors need to be preaching from a biblical worldview, because through that, it's very clear to see that, I guess on one front, I get tired of, I feel like I'm apologetic all the time.
Right.
It's always like, oh, we're sorry about this, and we have to apologize for things. It gets tiring, but it's important if we repeat the same narrative that's truth. I'm hoping it goes against the false narratives, the propaganda.
Yeah.
So if you pull back just a little bit, if you look at the world, and I really like what I heard a colonel in the military from the UK say, if you look at how the world is kind of divvied up and who's the bedfellow with who.
Mm-hmm.
The M16s, if they're supplied with those kinds of arms, it's generally meaning they're a U.S. partner, right? Because we're supplying our partners.
Right.
If it's an AK-47, then they're partnered with Russia. And it's almost as if the Cold War never really went away.
Right.
And why am I bringing this up? So Israel, prior to 1948, when the land was, because then you're touching on who is a Palestinian, which actually was Jewish people. Arabs were never referred to with that context, and there was no land, there was no country called Palestine. It was a land called Palestine because the Roman Empire was calling it by the name of Israel's enemies as like call it a shtick, a way to like inflict pain.
Right. It was an in your face sort of thing.
Coming against Rome because of the attacks against the Roman Empire. They said, oh yeah, well, we're going to name this land Palestine, but there's no Palestinian king. There's no coinage or archaeological dig that says this was a country called Palestine. When they referred to Palestinians, they were Jewish people. Those were the natives. And in fact, somebody that you can go look up, she's brilliant. Her name is Natasha Hausdorff. She is an international lawyer, well-spoken, from the UK. And on her grandmother's passport said Palestinian. Just go Google it, look it up. She is fantastic, very brilliant. And you look at this situation where we're coming out of World War II, right, and almost go immediately into the Cold War. So Russia is trying to form their partnerships. The United States is forming theirs, and what became NATO, right? That's the original intent of that organization that I won't talk about right now. But Israel was friendly with Russia to an extent, but they ended up siding with the United States. My understanding of that is because of all the pogroms and what Jews went through in Russia. It's almost like, why would we align with that ideology where our people were inflicted with so much pain and suffering, right?
Yeah.
When that happened, it immediately turned Russia like, well, okay, then we'll side with the Arab nations. And I mean, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Iran, they were getting all of the military purchasing through Russia. And a lot of the testing actually came as a result from 1948 because, well, Israel was forming as it became a nation. I'll say the modern day state, the modern day nation of Israel was formed. And so as the Arab nations attacked Israel in its infancy, by God's grace and mercy and through tough grit of Jewish people, but mostly because of God keeping us alive as a nation, we're able to dispel those armies and defend ourselves, which is a miracle. And so you have the displaced Arabs, but everybody always focuses on that, and the nations are at fault over this because you had more displaced Jews being kicked out of Arab countries, plus a brand new nation state of Israel forming, and Israel can't take in. I think the number was something like 900,000 Jews being displaced in totality from Arab nations. Look it up. They lost homes.
Wow.
They had to leave everything and go to somewhere.
Yeah.
So they went to their only place that we could have as a nation. Most of them went to Israel. Others went to the United States and to other places. And this is all factual information you can look up. If I sat here as informed what books to read and all this, it would take up too much time. And the displaced Arabs, sad as it was, what happened to them? Because the Arab nations told them, leave your homes. We're coming in with our militaries. And once we destroy and demolish Israel, you can go back and take the spoils and have whatever you want. I mean, and so these families left. It didn't go there that way. And now Israel is dealing with you want to talk about an influx of immigration. Who are they going to take care of first? The displaced Jews that have been kicked out of all the places, because this is our only nation that we can be a people and have our national identity, which biblically is correct. And because of NATO international law, we also were approved to exist as a nation. So this displacement of the Arabs has never been resolved, and we're still dealing with it today. And who's at fault? The nations, because prior to that, those people were not called Palestinian Arabs. They were called Arabs. From where? Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Syria, from all the surrounding areas.
Right.
They didn't want to take their people back. They didn't want to deal with the immigration issue of their own people. And then over time, they saw, this displaced issue is for our benefit. And who had sided with the Arab neighbors? Russia. So Russia said, hey, we have this wonderful idea. Let's create this identity of people. We'll call them Palestinian people. We'll create this narrative, and we'll just keep poking at Israel until they fold, because Russia has no real relationship with them, and they've sided with the United States. And there you go. And so to this day, you have unsolved, resolved issues that go back to literally a nation that was approved to exist by international law. And then you have people displaced, and you have one of the largest immigration issues at that time to solve, and nobody wanted to, and they just kept kicking the can, hopefully to someone else to take care of.
With all of that said, who is Hamas in all of that? Who are these different parties? Because now it's not just Hamas. Obviously, that's what started it, was that original attack. But now you've got Hamas, Hezbollah, all of these different groups. Who are they, and what are they after? And we know that there's two things going on here. We've got the natural and the supernatural aspects of all of this. But from so I guess really from both of those standpoints, what's actually going on here? But who are these people that are going after Israel?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question. So let me start first with the physical, tangible, what we can see. So going back to that war in 1948, it caused a lot of problems, right? Because now the Arab nations have lost, not looking good for their people, right?
Right.
And you fast forward, it wasn't the last time that all of the surrounding Arab nations attacked Israel. You have another skirmish in 1955 called the Sinai campaign. Then you go to 1967. Then you have 1973. And now that one was the last official declaration of war against Israel from the surrounding armies. From that point, we just start seeing terrorism and attacks against Israel, what we call the Intifada. And from that, you have the nation of Iran, who has declared from the leadership, the Ayatollah, after the king of Iran and his family left, right? Because, I mean, that's a whole separate thing that we could talk to and bring into this. But just to keep it simple, the Ayatollah, the leader of Iran, has declared a jihad against Israel, and has spent a lot of money, instead of investing it into their people, took that and invested in terrorism to surround Israel with proxies and to try to choke them out that way.
Yeah.
And so Gaza, which was completely in Israel's control. Israel pulled out, and they left the Palestinian Authority in place. It just gets better. I mean, it's really crazy. Um, then this group Hamas comes in as we'll call them a party group running for office in Gaza, supported by Iran. They win, and then they don't just like remove the other terror group. They were taking them to the tops of buildings, and you can look all of this up. They were kicking them over the ends of buildings. They were murdering them. Hamas wanted to establish itself as the supreme authority when it won the election of the people, and then they became the ruling force in Gaza. And the Palestinian, the PLO, who Yasser Arafat, I know I'm throwing a lot of facts. People are like, who's that guy? Yasser Arafat was the leader of the Palestinian liberation. I forget, sorry, what the O is, but it was the PLO.
Yeah,
is what he established, Yasser Arafat, and he was like the leader of that group, and that was the supreme authority up until that time.
Okay,
and that when Yasser Arafat died, he left Abbas in charge, and over in the West Bank they were leading, and also in Gaza. But when Hamas took over in Gaza, whoever survived the killings and onslaught went over to the West Bank, and the PLO is still the quote leadership of the Palestinian people there, also a terrorist group.
Okay.
You can't make this up.
Yeah.
You really, let me liken it to this real quick. So if you're watching from the United States, it's almost like you have the United States of America, and we've allowed somehow the drug cartels to have their own places in Israel. And we get so tired of dealing with the drugs and everything. We say, listen, guys, if we can have peace with you, we'll give you a part of California. Will that keep you happy? And they go, oh, sure. Well, we'll just take this part of the property for now.
Right.
Are we going to allow a group to come in and start creating their own mini city states within a country? I mean, the whole thing just becomes bizarre.
Yeah, that is bizarre. And bearing in mind, none of these people are simpatico with Israel. So they're all so everybody's against Israel, and then there's just this utter brutality across the board. And so,
yeah, and sadly, not to cut you off, but I do want to bring up one point that's not readily spoken about. Like, why is this ingrained hatred?
Yeah.
In the we'll just use the terminology everyone understands today. The Palestinian people, the Arabs surrounding Israel, is because it's indoctrinated into the children from the beginning. It's horrible. I mean, if you go and Google Palestinian children indoctrination, there's documentaries on it, and it's disgusting. I mean, I could not raise my children in an ideology that hates and wants to commit genocide against another people group. But the nations are silent against it. And so the generation, if you go back into time, the generation that was raised as kids in this ideology, who was the generation acting in a majority during October 7th? It's them.
Yeah.
Because that's all they know.
Right.
And so it's sad on one front that we have to say we care. I mean, as Jews, I don't have one friend that I can think of, and I have many of them over there, that we've ever talked about hatred of any people group.
Right.
And we actually feel compassion for the Palestinian people, and we just want peace. We don't want war. It's like, I just listed since 1948, since the modern day state of Israel has been established as a nation, how many wars they've been in, and then how many proxy wars that they've had to deal with.
And then you also, again, you've got the natural with the supernatural all mixing in there together. And you've got Iran who's funding a bunch of this stuff, which seems not to make much sense. And it's not even like it's this huge plot of land or something like that. And now we know, again, like you said, Russia and all of that, like it's just so intermingled, and it doesn't make sense to the natural mind. Why is this small state, quote unquote, causing so much turmoil? But, and we, again,
everything's been flipped on its head in this situation. The nations had such compassion for the Jewish people because of the Holocaust. And I want to remind everyone that the word genocide was used specifically to explain what happened as a result of the Holocaust. It's the intentional removal of a people group. So you hear a lot of terms and words being thrown at Israel, but actually none of them can stick because none of them are factual. They're not based in even international law. And that's I was watching Natasha today, one of her interviews, and she was listing it by law and how many she had to go through is Israel apartheid? Are they colonialists? All of these words that are used to explain what's happened in other parts of the world, they're all being used against Israel. And it's all about, it stems from propaganda.
Yeah.
And there's different ways to wage war.
Yeah.
And this one in the media right now is a war of words. And when you read from a scriptural basis about all this, it's all going to go back, and the focus of the world is going to be back on Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. Well, that's biblical.
Right.
I mean, no other book has been as accurate as the Bible to not predict, but even just to tell what is the end going to be like.
Yeah.
And somebody even brought this up in the media yesterday. They said, I don't understand why the world is so drunk on what's happening in Israel and in Jerusalem. They, with their own mouth, they're like using the language within Scripture.
Yes,
they don't understand, because you've got genocide happening in Africa with Muslim extremist groups murdering over 50,000 Nigerian Christians. Where is that in the news? What's happened to the civil war in Syria? You don't hear about that in the news. We're over, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands now have been displaced, killed. Mm-hmm, it's horrendous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it goes back to this, what I shared earlier. We're looking at everything incorrectly. We have to stop looking at the world through a cultural lens and through a biblical one, because when we look at it through when we look clearly through from Genesis, everything else is made clear. God himself, who is the creator of heaven and earth, put all of this into place from the beginning, where he was trying to establish a relationship with humanity when he created us.
Yeah.
Sin entered, and now you have this war between the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of hell. It's a spiritual battle, and it's being brought into the physical realm. And we all know how it's going to end up if we read the biblical text.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how all of those news journalists and leaders of nations are going to feel when there is an actual person by the name of Jesus returning and reigning and ruling from Jerusalem.
Yeah. And I have to say for myself, because I grew up in a Christian home and have learned about Israel and all of these things all of my life. And I've always grown up in not just a Christian household, but a very pro-Israel home. And we, bless Israel. And we know that those who bless Israel will be blessed. And these are God's people and all of that. So it kind of blows my mind when people are wondering why is this happening, or what's going on, or why are we looking? And it's like that is not just the narrative of history. Like this is what it is. This is all there is this story that we're watching be played out from the beginning. And to this day, even still, what's going on in Israel is a picture of what's going on in the kingdom as a whole. And, you're talking about looking at it from a biblical perspective. I know, at least for myself, and I'm sure for other people, we all want to look at what's going on right now, and we want to put a stamp on it and say we're in the end times. And we know that this second we're closer than we were 10 seconds ago. So that's a given. But, I'm going to grab my Bible here. So I was doing some reading, and this is just one. Of course, I'm sure you've got a million, and I mean, you guys know far more than I do, but just in Zechariah 14.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm just going to read the first few verses here, a couple of verses here. And I read this, and I'm like, oh, okay. So this is exactly what has happened. And I'm sure could probably be applied to other times in Israel's history, even just in the recent history where you talk about all these different wars. But 14:1 and 2, a day of the Lord is coming, Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and all the women raped. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. And it goes on. And I mean, again, like you said, we know how this ends, but when you read those things, it feels like, okay, so this is happening right before our very eyes. And you see in Ezekiel where it talks about Gog and Magog and all these different things, where I'm not asking you to tell us what no one knows, but where from a biblical scholar like yourself and somebody who studies and knows these things better than most people, where would you put us in all of this? Because again, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's end times for sure. I mean, now it's almost to the point where my mom and I will be out in public and somebody's carrying their little lap dog into the grocery store with them, and we're like, it's the end times for sure. So we talk about it kind of lightly because it feels so obvious, but again, what is the end times? Jesus was preparing them from the time he rose. He was preparing him that he was coming back soon. So, and again, the early disciples, the early church, all of that, that's how they lived their lives. We want to live our lives that way, but it feels certainly closer than it was, yesterday.
Yeah, there's someone I really respect, Dr. Michael Brown.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed him, and he was like, listen, I've been hearing it's the last days since I've been a Christian, since 1960. It's
right.
like, well, we're really close now. I think what through all I've read, what really gives the best blueprint, I know this may shock you and your viewers, but if you read what Jesus said in his own words in Matthew 24,
yeah,
where does he point everyone to? He doesn't bring a new revelation to everyone. He goes right back to the scriptures, and he points to Daniel, the prophet.
Yeah.
And what he had to say about what happens at the last, because Daniel received I would say, a look into the end. And then you can look and parallel the book of Daniel with Revelation, and John, who received the revelation from heaven about last days. And there's so much in Revelation. It's like you need to it turns into a Bible study, right? To explain all of the characters and the animals and all of it. It's a lot.
Right.
But it's a fascinating study. And but not to get away from, just before everyone that's watching is like, I feel like I'm being fire hosed and I don't even know where to land this plane. So
Yeah.
let me help you out right now. There is a really good documentary called Hope in the Holy Land. Hope in the Holy Land. And if you look it up and you Google it, maybe it's something you could put in the description,
Yeah, for sure.
Rebecca, because I love that it took this person who is a Christian and who was raised with a love for Israel, a desire to actually go himself and investigate and see what's going on. And typically, there's everyone is a professor. Everyone now has become a professional media person who can adequately share and tell somebody else what's actually happening and going on in the Middle East. And I'm like, bravo, you've done what nobody else can do. It's fascinating. I call it TikTok University.
Yeah.
It's just people where they get their information and they're almost readily willing to believe anything.
Right.
But there's a few people who have actually put their own lives at stake to bring really well documentation and to document and put these documentaries together and broadcast them. And it's really well done. Hope in the Holy Land. You'll see the true story in front of your eyes. And then once you see what he experienced in Gaza before October 7th, you'll be like, wow, there were so many warning signs of what was going to happen. Okay, so I digress from that part because I think it's important. I gave so much factual information. I want people to be able to land and go to a source where they can get the information, because what I want to do is inspire people to be searchers of the truth.
Yes.
I'm so tired of people saying, well, this is my truth and you have your truth and we're not going to agree. There's only one truth.
That so goes against the definition of truth.
It's bizarre what we've made it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was listening to two smart people debate for about an hour on what is truth, and I'm like, this is obnoxious. I can't believe I wasted an hour of my life. It's like you have the truth, right? And then you have somebody who looks at it and goes, I don't want to believe it because I don't want to. And that's what it really comes down to. But that also plays into the biblical narrative of people are going to start calling what's right wrong.
Exactly.
What is good evil, and they'll call evil good.
Right.
So it's like if you really want to know and get a heartbeat for what's going on, if you look through a biblical lens where we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, another wonderful scripture that gets pulled out of context, but against principalities of darkness of evil. And those principalities that were over those nations, they haven't gone anywhere.
Right.
Modern day Iran, that was Persia. We could go into the biblical context of that. Some of these other places, Iraq, that was Babylon.
Right.
England came in and made a mess of the Middle East. I love the people from UK, but they tried to bring stability and take all these tribal people and form these nations. And Islam is not broken up that way. It's a majority of Islam is Sunni, and then a smaller part is Shia. They hate each other, and their disagreement is who's going to lead the final war against all of the people of the world. And they can't even agree on anything except that they hate Jews. They don't particularly care for Israel. That's the only thing that really unites them. But anyway, it's an important piece of history to understand that when you look at the Middle East, you need to look at it for what it is and for not what it's not.
Right.
When the United States went into Iraq, we stirred the beehives so bad. We didn't go in with the greatest plan.
Right.
To bring stability. We actually made it worse. And we helped Saddam Hussein, who was one of the smaller sects within Islam. We removed him. It's not that he was a good guy. He wasn't. but we allowed the other faction, the other sects within Islam, to have the prominence and the power over there. And
Yeah.
the Middle East is run by the sword. It's not pretty.
Right.
It is a very complex situation over there, and it's not going to be solved by nations trying to come together to bring peace, because it doesn't exist that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And here in the United States, I think you mentioned Iraq, like we think I love the United States. We're very United States centric, and we see ourselves as the answer. And we think that by the time this comes out, the election will have happened. So we think whatever, right. So we think whatever those results are gonna make the difference. And it might have some effect on it. But then at the same time, we also see Israel has taken out, and I'm not even going to try with the names because I know I'll mess them up. But all of these leaders, one after the other, is like then the new guy and the successor who's like, he hadn't even had a chance to warm up the seat of the guy that Israel just got before him and took him out. So the United States, we look at this and we think we're going to go over there and solve these problems. And you do see from a worldly perspective, like people are thinking they're going to go and have world peace, like it's Miss Congeniality. And that's not it. And I found it kind of funny because you see people get all frustrated at these things, and it even Christians are angry with what's going on. And yes, there's that righteous anger. Of course, we don't want to see this injustice happening. But at the same time, what you said of, well, why are we surprised? Why are we acting shocked that people are believing these lies? Why are we acting shocked that Israel is being attacked? Why are we acting shocked that anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head yet again? Like, we are told that these things are going to happen. But so for us in the United States, we have a role, but we're not the main character as much as we'd like to think we are. But what would you say the United States' role is in all of this?
I love the United States. This is my home. It's given my family, being Jewish, a safe place to worship the Lord and to travel, do things that we love to do. And I hesitate to get into, there's a few narratives, right? And there's a couple different directions you can take this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always very careful. And if other people have listened to some of my other interviews, I'm very careful I don't want to be seen as an administrative basher on anyone.
Right.
I do have great concern with how the Biden-Harris leadership was handling dealing with Israel on the very beginning. I was pleasantly surprised to see how Biden was verbally and also in his actions staying with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the narrative shifted a little bit, but the needs of Israel were still being seen to. There was a lot of travel between the United States and Israel, and also the middle. I mean, you could see Blinken and the rest of them going around trying to resolve things as best as they know how, which is usually educational, and it's not. But I always like to be careful, because sometimes people can get turned off when it's all, oh, we're just going against Israel all the time and da-da-da-da. I don't like to jump onto that train. I want to be careful, because the relationship between the United States and Israel is a very important one. And I want to encourage people, like, what we have done as a nation to bless Israel is unprecedented. Yeah. Other nations have completely abandoned Israel.
Yeah.
I won't go and start naming names, but thankfully, to this point where we're at today, we have stood by Israel. but I do have concerns because
Yeah.
I am seeing the narrative continually shift, and that narrative empowered and encouraged certain individuals to keep the war going from the terrorist side because they saw the United States narrative changing, and that is not good.
Right.
That should never have been. Israel is the only democratic nation in the Middle East. So we, as the United States, who are a republic,
Mm-hmm.
and our leaders are voted in, why would we be siding with others who are going against our greatest ally and friend, who we think and are more aligned on a moral compass? So when you see that shift, that causes, I mean, if you look at who voted in the UN against Israel on some of these charters, it's very disturbing.
Yeah.
But what you read from Zechariah, it makes sense when you see that the nations right now are realigning and there's a shift happening.
Yeah, you can
And
feel it.
And my concern is, if you see the United States completely change wholeheartedly against Israel, then I would say we are probably, I don't know, months away from maybe seeing that, because I feel that even though we have this amazing Abrahamic Accords that President Trump put together, and if anyone doesn't know what that is, so it was to establish relationships with Israel and its neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
and a few of the Arab nations signed on to that, and it's been a well put together. It has a lot to do with trade
Yeah.
and also defense, because these other nations are worried about Iran coming after them. Because again, if you study the Middle East and the geopolitics of everything, it's messy. It's not clean. And when you really start digging into these things, all right, let me say it this way. To be an anti-Semite, to be anti-Zionist, is to say that you don't, it's not that you don't agree with Jewish people. It's that you don't like them. It's
Right.
a hatred, right?
Yes.
Those words are to describe that, right?
Yeah.
But it's not to say that you don't disagree. I mean, as an American, do I always agree with the United States and what we do?
No.
You can disagree with Israel, but it doesn't mean you hate them, and you
Right.
start repeating some of this horrific language that none of it's true. And listen, if I was a certain generation and I went to TikTok University and that's where I'm getting my media and my information, I would be horrified to see the Palestinian children being killed, and all of these
Right.
videos that are being created. But there's an agenda. It's propaganda that's coming out from all over the place, and you literally have to look at each video and say, that one was actually created by the terrorists, because let's face it, Hamas is still in quote control of what's going on in Gaza. They're doing everything they can to hold on to their power.
Yeah.
And so nothing gets out media wise without their stamp of approval, right?
Yeah.
And at one point it got so crazy, they started calling it, I think it was Polyworld. They're a Palestinian Hollywood. They were making videos. But
Wow.
it's not to say that when war is horrible, right? And what Israel has actually accomplished in terms of carrying out this war has been amazing. They have done everything they can to ensure the safety of the civilian people. They don't want to see innocent people killed. But Hamas has been embedded in the civilian population, putting these tunnels underground. And when Israel was going through all of these places that they would take out, there were so many ammunition and arms. It was just They turned everyone's home into an armory.
Right.
They were turning the schools and the hospitals into safe houses for terrorists and places for them to hide their gear. And underneath were trucks and tanks. And it's just the narrative is so twisted. You would literally have to sit down and look at every piece of information that comes out, and then you just have to question it. And I think Natasha does one of the best jobs of going through the data and giving the because it is important. If you're going to say something, I believe it's important to be able to back it up with where is the resource. And sadly today, the media, specifically on one part of the I won't say one part of the aisle, but a couple media outlets,
Yes. Yeah.
they are purporting a certain agenda because it does come down to marketing money. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a good friend tell me that worked as a detective. You always track the money because
Yep.
through that you can usually find the crime of what happened. So through the media, you go track the money. Who is funding the media? Who's the big giver, right? Because
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
people that, because they have to, the outlets have to keep those people happy.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing where podcasters, things are shifting over this direction because we're able to have these kind of conversations and it's not being controlled.
Right.
You
And I
know, you didn't
think
tell me beforehand what I had to say.
right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you know, I think that people are getting wise to that, and people are tired of it. We're collectively, and I do think no matter where you fall on the political landscape, I do think it's starting to become more across the board, and that's why you see people changing their minds on things or becoming more moderate, or something that was this side is now it's like it. Wait a second, you know, somebody's trying to tell me what to think. No, thank you. And I think people are starting to wake up to that. And it's exactly what you just said. That's why people are wanting to, people want to hear real conversations from real people who, and not just opinions on the street necessarily and taking that for fact, but that unadulterated, there is no money here. So, you know, you want to follow the money. No, this is friendship and a real conversation to say, hey, like let's. I'm learning so much even from this conversation, and that's us who, like I said, we have you guys. We've got other friends that we can ask questions to, and I know so many people want to know the truth, but it's hard to find a good place to get it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And I applaud you for having this conversation because they are important.
Yeah.
And look, I have friends who are Arabs and we love each other.
Right.
We're not allowing an agenda to separate us because the one unifying factor in our relationships is Yeshua.
Yes.
Jesus. He
Yes.
is the one that brings us all to the table. And some of them are more concerned about us than people in the just, you know, good God-fearing Gentile believers, which
Right.
it shows the true heart that you know they get it. Our Arab Christian believers that are praying with us and standing with us through all this. It's the Jews are in the minority. It's crazy that we've somehow become the villain now in all of this.
Right.
It doesn't make sense because it is a spiritual attack.
Exactly.
That and what brought us to this point, we can't forget that it is what happened on October 7th when Hamas, they are the ones that broke through the border.
Yeah.
They weren't in a prison camp. They were having a really good life if they wanted. They could have even had a better life. They
Right.
weren't spending all that money on terrorism. They had property right in front of the ocean. I mean, I would like to have a house right in front of the beach. Be kind of that would be
Right?
nice.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, and if I could encourage everyone, you know, if you want to get to the root of it and you want to say, I want to put myself in a position where I can understand this from a better perspective. If you put yourself in a Palestinian life, the only conclusion you can come to is that Hamas is the enemy. It never should be pointed at Israel. Israel was one of the largest humanitarian aids being brought into Gaza. So we didn't start this war. The enemy did. And when you start a war, you don't have the ability to say, oh, time out, peace. No, we didn't mean this. Oh. It doesn't work that way. The Taliban hit the United States on September 11th. I remember exactly where I was that day. Very impactful on my life. And we went over to Afghanistan to handle business, right? Did we ask other people, hey, guys, can we go into Afghanistan? We said, who's with us? Because we're going in, right? And then we had the coalition. We went into Afghanistan to take care of things. And the Taliban, they got hit pretty hard. But can you imagine? They go, oh, man, we really messed up. And then Osama bin Laden goes, guys, we got to stop all this. We really didn't mean what happened on September 11th. Right. Can we just go back to the way things were? The United States is going to be like, no, you started this war and you don't have the right to say when it ends. We're going to take you out. Well, Israel is only trying to remove Hamas.
Right.
And then now you have Hezbollah up in Lebanon to the north, who all the while was launching tens of thousands of rockets into Israel. And Israel kept saying, stop doing that. Yeah. Stop hitting us with rockets. Stop trying to kill our troops. And they just kept doing it over. It's a provocative attack because they wanted Israel to come in and attack. It's the same plan. Like if we had hours, I could sit here and draw it all up. It was Hamas's strategy to go commit genocide in Israel, bring hostages back. Yeah. Wait for Israel to attack them.
And then start
because
pointing the finger.
They know because they know the world's approval of Israel initially would turn against them. And then it would be on the side of the, quote, atrocities that are happening in Gaza, which aren't happening.
Wow. Yeah.
And then everybody forgets where we came from.
Yeah.
And that is why we're at today where we are. And it's really a proxy war from Iran to Israel.
Yes.
And if you read Ezekiel 37:38, one day, it could be soon. I don't know if we're there yet. It says that the Lord himself is putting a hook into Persia, modern day Iran, to come out to battle, and it's not going to go well for them.
Yeah, and you say all of that. I think is so important for us to realize that war and battle is, first of all, it's not against flesh and blood, first and foremost, but also there is information warfare, economic warfare, all of these different things that are going on at the same time. It's not just where the rockets are. There's money, there's like you were saying, the propaganda, all of this stuff that's going on as well, that's just muddying the waters. And the bottom line is we know the truth. We know where to get the truth. And like you said, and I think this is the most important takeaway, is looking at all of this through a biblical lens. You just have to step back from what the popular culture is telling you, and step back from anything that the world's doing. That's kind of my cue to let's step as far away from that as possible. And let's go to God's word and listen to the Holy Spirit for that guidance and all of that. So to wrap us up, you started this and said that you all have felt very alone in this season. So what, from people who are pro-Israel and want to stand alongside you guys, what's the best thing to do? How do we show that support? How do we, what can we do to help?
Yeah, I've summed it up into 3 parts: pray, post, and then partner. Pray, because the number one, I would say, weapon that we have as believers is prayer. And I've seen amazing things shift because of it.
Yeah.
When we unite with God's desires, we can see amazing things happen. But we have to find his heart and intention on things, pray in that. Then comes the breakthrough. So I always say pray and then post. There is so much propaganda. We talked about a battle for people's hearts and minds. And if we're not careful on where we're getting our information, we'll believe anything. And so, but we also have to be proactive in getting the truth out there in love.
Yeah.
I don't like posting things that vilify anybody, but it is important that we do post things that are factual and get the narrative out there, because there's so much information people are looking for what the truth is. And we just, Hope in the Holy Land is one of those resources I love pointing people to, because it's factual and it's done in a good heart.
Yeah.
And then lastly, partner with ministries that are on the very front lines, doing everything they can to post and to get the truth out there as much as we can. It's inundated on all social media with all kinds of different things to watch and see and listen. And it's important for us who are believers to seek after the truth. And we know who is the truth and the life, right?
Yes.
And it behooves us to do a little homework. I know we all have busy lives, but if this is something that's really on your heart, I would just encourage you just to take a time out and really do the research yourself, become a journalist. And through that, when you get to the truth, hold on to it. And just, a lot of these simple things are just loving your Jewish neighbors, because they don't know that you're with them. And unless you share and say something, they just don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to put all of those different resources and stuff that you mentioned, some Wilbur Ministries information, all of that stuff in the description. So you guys definitely check that out if you are interested in learning more about all of this. Thank you so much for talking with us. I know we could talk about this for, the next 24 hours and still not even almost hit everything. But thank you so much. This just gives a little bit of context to everybody, and hopefully gets us started on the right path and thinking in the way of truth and looking from that biblical perspective. So really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.